Hi, I'm Kirk Bevins, and you're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 177!
Darts is great. Darts is great because sport is great. It offers the opportunity for normal people to realise their dreams. This isn't just some lottery though, not buy a ticket, get lucky. Oh, you're a champion, congrats. It takes sacrifice. It takes work, hard graft, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, honing your skills, being as good as you can be, striving for success, and in the full knowledge that most times, the vast majority of times, you'll come up short. But still you have to try again. That is the way of the sportsman, of the darts player, to suffer failure upon failure, but keep coming back for more, in the hope that one day it might just go your way. That one day you'll elevate yourself to another level, through your sweat and your tears and your blood, to undergo such a metamorphosis that your ordinary self transforms into something, into someone that can achieve the extraordinary. This is what we have seen. We've seen it at a holiday camp in Minehead. We've seen a man so battered by defeat, by time, by failure, rise up. We've seen a man who gazed at the stars for so long, now simply reach up, extending his arm into the heavens to pluck his own personal dream from the void, and by sheer force of will command it to be his. It has happened. He made it happen. We saw it, experienced it, we felt it. Andrew Gilding's struggle, Goldfinger's realisation of his goals, this man's taming of the improbable. It nourishes us, it gives us hope, it shows us that our reach can match our imagination. It opens doors to whole new universes of possibility. We live in a post-Gilding world, a world where we can dare to dream to be so much more than we think we are, to throw off the shackles of limitation, a world of hope and of triumph and of firmly fixed eyewear. He has shown us the way. He has shown us what is possible. He has shown us the golden thumb of our own limitless potential. Andrew Goldfinger Gilding, the UK Open champion of 2023.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. Alex Moss here, and alongside me to help me recap what was a truly memorable weekend of darts. It is darts statistician, the darts driver king himself, Burton DeWitt. Burton, how are you doing?
Yeah, how can I not be doing great after this past weekend? Just an absolutely ludicrous UK Open. I don't know. Do we plan to talk about that at all?
Yeah, we might fit it in, I think, if we've got time.
All right, then I won't go into that much detail on it now, since I guess we'll speak about it in a minute. But I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. And it's not ideal when you're recording a podcast to be lost for words, but we've had a few days now to reflect on Sunday night's events in Minehead, where Andrew Gilding defeated Michael van Gerwen 11-10 to win his first PDC major title at the UK Open. You're going to hear from the man himself, Goldfinger. He's back on the show later on. You're going to hear from the newest major champion and also a former major winner, Mark Dudbridge, his first time on the show. Those two chats coming up a little bit later, but let's get straight into it and giving you guys a look behind the scenes. On our spreadsheet, we set out some topics and questions to answer each week, but for this first topic, I've simply put 3 words: Andrew Gilding, discuss. Fire away, Burton.
Yeah, well, you might be at a loss for words. My friend's dogs in the background aren't, so advance apologies if Emily or Cooper start barking at any point during this show. But yeah, I think we're both at a loss for words about Gilding's win. Because, well, on one hand, when we recorded a few weeks ago and we were discussing who would be the most likely first-time winners, I can't recall whether it was you or I who said Gilding, but we both agreed. And it was a player that over the last 6-9 months looked like he would win a title. He made 3 finals last year, made his first Euro Tour final, made some other Players' Championship final. and was looked on the cusp of getting his first title at some point sooner rather than later. But I don't think either of us thought that title would be a major championship. It's not to say that we didn't think he was playing well enough to win a major. He was at the back end of last year. He was frequently averaging north of a ton and beating anyone who came in front of him and playing fearlessly in those matches. But there is a difference between doing that over a best out of 11 or even best out of 15 legs, as it would be in the final of a Pro Tour or Euro Tour, and doing that in a longer format from the beginning. Yes, it's only an extra 3 legs you have to win a best of 21. But in the end, that's quite a bit. That's an extra 10 minutes. And especially at a tournament like this, where it's tiring and it's draining and it's 3 days of nonstop action. To be able to cross the line in that, I don't think was something that we thought Gilding would do to get his first title. But looking back on the weekend, it wasn't all that surprising. And you'll hear from Gilding in a bit, as Alex said. And he's thought that he had a relatively speaking easy run to the title. And in some respects, that isn't an unfair statement. He avoided any of the Premier League players up until he played MVG in the final. He avoided a lot of other major champions that could have come his way. But it's not like his draw was that easy when you look at how the opponents he was played over the course of the weekend. His first match on Saturday afternoon was against Luke Woodhouse. Luke Woodhouse had averaged well north of a ton in his previous 2 matches, and I'll talk more about Woodhouse in a couple questions' time. But Luke Woodhouse was looking like the breakthrough player and the breakout player of this tournament. And yes, Luke Woodhouse's average did drop more than 10 points for that 5th round match. But that's because Andrew Gilding just took that early lead and never let him back into that match. Gilding played solid against a player who had been playing brilliantly before that. Then he went in the next round against Brendan Dolan. Obviously, Brendan Dolan's a former major finalist, has won 8 times on the tour, but Dolan had also been playing really well. Had a very good win earlier that day against Chris Dobie, and Dolan also had a very good come-from-behind win against Vincent van der Voort in the 4th round in a high-quality affair and a last-leg decider. So Dolan was another one of those players who was playing well and was probably Gilding's worst match of the weekend. And obviously Dolan's worst match as well. Gilding was able to get over the line. Then he went against Martin Schindler, another player who I will talk about later. And Schindler was having just a really phenomenal weekend. He had beaten Adrian Lewis a couple rounds earlier. Adrian Lewis had been one of the other best players of the tournament going into that match. He beat Johnny Clayton, who obviously everyone knows who Johnny Clayton is. He's only in the Premier League this year. He's only won 5 majors in the last couple of years. And Martin Schindler beat him convincingly and comfortably. Yes, Schindler really struggled in that quarterfinal, but Gilding just didn't give him a sniff. And then against Adam Gavlas, who had been another one of those breakout players, having beaten Rob Cross in the quarterfinals. One session aside, Gilding was absolutely brilliant in that match. He missed a bunch of doubles in the second session. He very easily could have been 8-2 up instead of 5-all. He could have won that match 14-3 instead of 11-6. But he showed a little bit of nerve in that second session, but otherwise was averaging pretty much a ton for that match, that one session aside, and beat one of the other breakout players of the weekend. So yes, Gilding had what may on paper look like a relatively easier ride, but it wasn't really. He beat players who were on form, playing above their normal grade in this tournament, and he beat most of them convincingly. And then in the final, after a few times missing some opportunities, because he definitely could have had the lead early on. I guess he was up 4-2, but he did have some opportunities. He would miss 3 in hand, usually at 20s and 10s, to really consolidate. It was basically a break fest for a while, and it was kept being because Gilding was missing those darts to go ahead. He stayed in there, he hung in there, he hit when he needed to avoid falling too far behind, and then beat the person who is now the best or second best player in the world 11-10. I think it was a really good weekend. Yes, he didn't average higher than 99 in any match, and most of his matches were in the mid-90s. Yes, on paper, the run did appear to be easier, but it wasn't as easy as it might appear. He beat players who were playing really well that weekend. He made them drop their level 10 points. And in the end, he was the champion and the deserving champion. And we can now say, not just has he won a title, but he is a major champion. He is the UK Open champion. And we'll see what he does from here.
Yeah, I mean, what more can you say to that? Between us, we've been watching darts for a long time now, and you'd think after all this time nothing would really surprise you in this game. But I've got to say, for me personally, that result on Sunday night is still sinking in, and we're talking on this Tuesday evening when we're recording, and that doesn't happen very often. Usually you watch a game, watch a tournament, the result, you process it fairly quickly. And I think the last time I felt like this after watching a game of darts was when Peter Wright won his first World Championship, because for me that was unexpected to see him get the better of Michael van Gerwen in a final after losing all those big finals. But yeah, that took a few days to sink in. But even though I was fortunate enough to chat with Andrew earlier today, I tagged on the end of some of his media that he was doing with some other outlets, and thanks to Dave Allen and the PDC for fitting us in, it's still a result that doesn't quite feel real yet for me, and I'm sure it will by the time this episode goes out. But wow, what a moment. The last 3 years we've had a lot of new first-time winners of PDC majors, some that have been more surprising than others, some where you saw that player look like he was heading in that direction towards winning that major. You look at someone like Michael Smith, who got to all those finals and then finally got over the line last year. But for Andrew Gilding, before this past weekend, he'd had one major semi-final. That was 2015 at the UK Open. To get back to that final session 8 years later and go 2 steps further, beat the pre-tournament favourite in Michael van Gerwen in a decider against the darts in that last leg, it's incredible. And this was Andrew Gilding's first PDC title of any kind. As you mentioned, he's made multiple finals on the Pro Tour. He made 3 last year, and that helped him get back into a lot of those major events that we hadn't seen him in for a while. At Ali Pali in December, that was his first World Championship in 7 years. But as he said at the weekend, and he said to us in October last year, he's been putting in the hard work. He's taking it more seriously, and the proof of that is in the results, not just at the weekend, but over the last 12 months. He'd risen into that top 40. He was well on course to get back in the top 32 at some point this year. The title on Sunday, that's catapulted him there now up to number 25. And as Dave Allen at the PDC pointed out on our call with Andrew earlier, he's got a real shot now of cracking that top 16 at the end of the year. And it's a remarkable achievement. And as you mentioned with the draw, you can say it was kind to him. He didn't face a player in the world's top 20 until the final. But that's what can happen at the UK Open. The random draw, it does lend itself to players getting hard draws. Some players maybe getting easier draws, missing out on the big boys until the end. But even if the draw was kind, to then beat MVG in the final, who led for the majority of that final, to break him in 13 darts, to be there ready when Van Gerwen missed that match start at double 16, and to take that chance, I can't say how impressive that was. And yeah, I'm pleased for him, and who knows where this is going to lead. Could he go on and win more majors? If he does, or if he doesn't, he's forever going to be remembered as a major champion, and that's something that no one can ever take away from him. Andrew Gilding is a major champion.
Yes, he is. Obviously, Michael van Gerwen, we can't take away that he is a 40-something time major champion, but he didn't add to that at the weekend. One of his more surprising defeats, his first defeat in the UK Open final, but his second major defeat in a little over 2 months. How do you think he will reflect on losing the final, having been, depending on where you look, I've seen 8-1 on and 10-1 on, such a heavy favorite?
Yeah, and I even saw the bookmaker that I use. I saw him as a 1-12 shot going into that final. So I think it is going to be a defeat that stings for a little bit for him. And on the plus side for Michael van Gerwen is that he has got the chance to get back on the horse, as it were. He's got the Premier League on Thursday. We're going to try and attempt our picks again for that a little bit later on. And I've seen today that he's entered the 2 Players' Championship events this weekend, and we've got some Euro Tours coming up this month as well. So opportunities are going to come pretty quickly for him to put that defeat behind him, and he'll be looking to the next tournament. And I think, in fairness to MVG, he is someone that can brush himself down and go again. And I think the defeat in the final is probably going to have more of an impact on other players. They're going to be looking at it and thinking, I can do what Andrew Gilding did. He's not invincible, and if Michael van Gerwen's not on his A game, I've got to make sure that I stick with him, because chances are going to come, and then it's going to be about whether I'm able to take those chances and keep the game close, or indeed go on and win it. And that's what we saw on Sunday night. Michael couldn't go through the gears like many would have expected him to, going up against someone playing in their first major final. He had so much more experience, and at the start of the final he did threaten to do that. He had that 12 darter, the 1-3-5 on the ball to go 2-0 up, and you do start to fear the worst for Andrew Gilding. But Michael didn't really push on after that, and I was having a look at some of the legs that he did win in that final, Michael, and there was 2 19 darters, 2 18 darters, and yeah, he won those 4 legs, but we never saw him go on a run of 4 or 5 legs where he was winning them in 4 or 5 visits, and that would have really broke the back of the game and ramp up the pressure. He had some big shots in there. There was a 130, a 170, as well as a 12 darter on throw, the 170 was, but the timing, it wasn't there. He left 170 in the penultimate leg, and that's when he really needed to take it out. The previous leg, when he got the 170, Andrew Gilding was stuck on 242, so he could have quite easily laid up for tops or double 16, and maybe that 170 would have gone in the next leg. So did he perhaps underestimate Andrew Gilding in the final a little bit? Maybe. He'd come through a hell of a tough draw to get to the final. 4 of his 5 games were against players in the top 16, and when it is a random draw, he didn't get much luck in the draw, but in the decider, kicks off with a 1-3-4, but after that it was Andrew Gilding hitting the big shots, 1-2-3, 1-2-2, the 180, whereas MVG, all his scores after that first one, all under 100, and that left him with 1 dart on a 102 to take it, and he wasn't able to do so. So yeah, I think it's going to be a defeat that he'll be disappointed with for a little while. And we think back to last year, 2022, he was 4 out of 4 in major finals. Well, 2023, we've had 2 major finals that Michael van Gerwen's been a part of, the World Championship and the UK Open, and he's lost them both. So that's a telltale sign for me that he's not playing at his best, and there is more work for him to do to get back to where he was before.
Yeah, and it's not just that he's not playing at his best per se, but it's that he's not able to sustain his best for as long as when he was, well, at his most dominant. Yes, the match against Luke Humphries, he was brilliant. The match against Nathan Aspinall, for the most part, he was brilliant. He had a dip in the middle of that match, but for the most part was playing pretty well. But he ran out of steam for the semifinals and finals. He just benefited that Dimitri appears to have some sort of bug against MVG recently, and just could not push MVG. And then in the final, Andrew Gilding was able to take advantage of all of MVG's mistakes, like MVG was taking advantage of a lot of Gilding's for much of that match as well. It was a match that both of them gave each other chances, but Gilding took more of those chances than MVG took. And it looked like he was just that little bit flat at the end of a long weekend. And you mentioned the World Championships. Obviously, that was a much, much, much longer match. The early stages of that match, he was playing at or near his best. Unfortunately for him, so was Michael Smith, and that meant that both of them were playing well, but MVG wasn't the one who was winning the key legs. And then MVG fell off, and Michael Smith started to pull away and made it suddenly 5-3, 6-3. But that's, again, what I was saying about how MVG's not been able to maintain his best for as long as he used to. And maybe that's something because it does get harder to keep that energy and to keep that concentration as you get into your 30s. I'm starting to notice that now, although I never was able to compete at anywhere near the level he was able to when he was in his 20s. But it does get that little bit harder, and maybe he's still trying to figure out how to balance himself through a longer match, or in the case of something like the UK Open, a longer weekend where you're now having to play back-to-back mid-length matches, but combined, they turn into one really long match. You have to win 22 legs, and he didn't have that advantage of getting that extra 45 minutes to an hour that Andrew Gilding had by having been in the first semifinal. So maybe Michael van Gerwen still needs to figure that part out a little bit more, because he still is the best or the second best player in the world. And I think he knows that. He gave Gilding too many chances, and Gilding took them. And on the night, therefore, he lost, and Gilding was the one who was left with the title. But Michael van Gerwen is still putting himself in position to win more often than anyone else in the world right now. Michael Smith being the one player who comes close in that regard. The difference is Michael van Gerwen isn't crossing the line as much as often when he's in that position as he used to. And that's going to be the thing that grates on him. You go back a couple years ago, he was just not putting himself even in the position to win. And that's why he went nearly an entire year without winning anything, waiting until September to win a World Series event and then adding one Pro Tour later in the year for a grand total of 2 titles, a far cry from the 20-odd that he was doing just a few years earlier. He's putting himself in that position now, last year and this year, and therefore he's winning more of them than he had been for the previous couple of years. He won 4 majors last year. I think there's every chance he'll do that again this year. But he still needs to figure out how to balance himself and balance his energy to be able to win these matches. Because he's just not playing at his best for long enough. It's costing him. What is he going to take out of this weekend? I don't know. I think it's going to be something like what I just said. I think he is still tinkering. I think he's still not tinkering like with his equipment, but tinkering with that mental preparation of his game. He's still figuring out how to get back as close as possible to where he was 5 years ago. And I think that's the right attitude to have. He's not satisfied with being the runner-up. He's not satisfied with being number 3 in the world. And it's now figuring out as he gets older, as he has, he's raising a child and raising a family and figuring out how to balance everything, how he can best approximate where he was 5 years ago with the limitations that he now has to deal with. And I think he is starting to figure it out. But in the end, this weekend, it didn't work out. And maybe that was just that luck of being in the second semifinal. But half the time that you make the UK Open semifinals, you'll have that luck of having to play those 2 matches back to back. And he still needs to figure out how to be able to get up for that final and to maintain himself throughout it. It's obviously difficult. We saw last year Michael Smith ran out of steam. We saw Rob Cross run out of steam a few years earlier. It's a very long weekend. And even if you're in that first semifinal, there's no guarantee you'll have the energy. But I think I think that that's where Van Gerwen still where he should at least be reflecting. And it's not to, take the negatives. It's how to, when he's in that position next time, to be able to pace himself so that he gets over the line.
We'll continue our look back at the UK Open in a moment, but first let's get to the first guest on this week's show, and what a guest we've got for you here. He is the newly crowned UK Open champion. Here's our chat with Goldfinger, Andrew Gilding. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the newly crowned UK Open champion, Andrew Gilding. Thanks for the time, Andrew. How are you doing?
You're very welcome. I'm doing great, thank you. I'm still buzzing.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you said on stage on Sunday night you couldn't believe it. We're talking only a couple of days after from the title win. Has it started to sunk in now that you are a major champion, or is it still taking some time?
Starting to, I suppose. I'm trying my best not to get too excited about it, but people keep reminding me.
And I listened to the interview that you did. I think it was with Dutch TV after the final, and they asked you how you were going to celebrate, and you said by going to sleep. It's quite a long day that Sunday, but did you manage to squeeze in a small celebration?
Yeah, you want to know my celebration? I got back to the hotel. Someone was kicking the snack machine because it was out of order. Nowhere was open to get food, so I had to go to the car and dig out a pot noodle. Thank you very much.
You've obviously since then you've had the long trip back to East Anglia. You mentioned you went and saw your mum afterwards. You've done that journey to Minehead many times over the years, but this one must have felt a bit more enjoyable with that trophy on board as well.
Yeah, I remember coming back when I made the semi-final a few years ago, absolutely buzzing, but this was surreal, I tell you. A trophy. I got a trophy. Mind you, I got a bigger trophy in Belgium for the runner-up. But this one is nicer.
We saw that there was a video on social media as well that the Suffolk County team, they had a long trip back on Sunday night from County Durham. They were watching you on their phones, the cheers when you won the title, the messages of congratulations. It must have been non-stop since Sunday night.
I saw a video of Jean watching me hit the final dart on the bus. Wow, that atmosphere. Apparently someone else said that's the most amazing bus journey they ever had home from County. They were like singing for 5 hours. I'm going to see the boys tonight probably, so that's going to be crazy.
We last had you on our show in October last year. It was just after you run to that final on the Euro Tour in Belgium, and you said you kept losing in the final. You had to do something about that. Well, the next final you're in, you've done that. You've won one.
I did actually when I talked on the stage. As runner-up, I said, I'll win the next one. Didn't think I would. I honestly thought I'd have to go through like the initiation process of missing a couple of match starts for a major or something, like everyone else does. But somehow it went in.
And you mentioned to the guys as well, if you won titles, you wanted to be someone that no one hates. You wanted people to like you as well. And judging from the crowd's reaction on Sunday, it sounds like you were a popular winner as well.
Yeah, I can't believe they're singing for me. I'd say, yeah, I don't want to be anyone who tries to put the opponent off or anyone who gets too big in their boots. I just want to, enjoy it, but don't take it too seriously, if you know what I mean.
We'll come back to the weekend in a moment, but when we last spoke 2022, it was a big year for you, getting back into a lot more of the TV events, and that finished with the World Championship at the end of last year, your first time back at Ali Pali in 7 years. What was it like going back there and walking up on that stage again?
Yeah, that's great. I like that. That's big there. The crowd is loud, usually, especially if you're playing a big player. I couldn't believe anywhere could be louder than Blackpool, but when I played Gary Anderson there a few years ago, that's the loudest crowd I've ever heard in my life. Mind you, they're pretty loud in Minehead, actually, especially during the breaks when they were singing the songs. They were singing Robbie Williams and Country Roads and stuff like that. That was quite an experience. I don't know if they caught that on telly.
I think we caught the end of Angels at one point. Yeah, it looked like a great atmosphere. And
that was an experience. Everyone singing.
The Worlds, of course, ended with that defeat to Dave Chisnell, and it was a closer game, I thought, than the scoreline suggests. Then you had a break before the Pro Tours. Did that give you a bit of time to reflect on the 2022 that you had, the strides that you'd made?
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed that break. That was a long break. I needed rest. I've got hobbies outside of darts. I like to play guitar, and I recently got a little drum kit. I'm just starting to learn. Someone gave me a flute. I love music. I love high-end stereo equipment as well. Unfortunately, that's expensive. But I've got a nice stereo in my car. I like to blast. That makes the long drives worthwhile. So I love music. I love computers and games. So any time off I get, I enjoy.
Well, you had a couple of Pro Tour weekends to kick off this year. Then it was the UK Open and this event, which, of course, even before the weekend, it holds some fond memories. You got there as a Riley's qualifier 2011, the run to the semis in 2015. So how are you feeling going into this year's UK Open?
Yeah, I remember Riley's qualifier when that was at Bolton. Wow, that was a venue. That used to get really hot there. And now Minehead's getting a reputation of being a little bit cooler. I'd prefer the cooler, thank you. Yeah, I remember beating Andy Hamilton and Brendan Dolan, actually, when I was a qualifier. That was my first big break, I think. That was before I turned pro, obviously. But yeah, what is it about Minehead? I suppose the open draw is handy because no disrespect to other players, but I had an easier draw than some people had, like Luke Humphries, for example. He had Damon Hatter, Michael Smith, Gary Anderson, did he play as well?
I think Van Gerwen he went out to in the end.
Oh, Van Gerwen, yeah. What a draw, right?
Well, you mentioned that draw as well because we'll touch on the run that you had. You beat your good friend Darren Webster in your first game, then a 99 average got you past Ricky Evans. Are you a player who's then going to watch the draw as it happens live, or do you wait to hear who you've got next?
I just wait. I'd get back to my hotel room whatever chance I get. I'd try and get ready for the next day or the next game. I was going backwards and forwards to Butlins twice a day during the tournament. Luckily, there's enough time just to have a little kip and get back on it. Well, that made a big difference, I think. I didn't play that well on Saturday. I was averaging low 90s, high 80s on Saturday, so I was lucky to get through those games. Glad to beat Darren. Me and him have got a bit of a rivalry going over the years. We like to rib each other about these things. He keeps saying to me, come back and talk to me when you won a tour event. So no, you know what he's going to get now.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to look forward to that. Well, you mentioned the Saturday as well. You got past Luke Woodhouse, Brendan Dolan, gets you into the quarterfinals, back into that Sunday, the finals day. And I was trying to think, is that the first time you've played on that main stage since that semi-final with Van Gerwen, or had you played on there since? 'Cause?
No, that was probably the last time, yeah. 'Cause I played on the main stage. 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 I played on the main stage that felt totally different because we went in from a different way, I think. And obviously my memories are from the final now, and that absolutely packed out that was. I've never seen it so full, I don't think.
Let's get on to that Sunday then, a special day for you. A 10-4 win against Martin Schindler gets you back into the semi-finals, and you said you wanted to go one better. You got past Adam Gavlas 11-6, and when the draw comes out for those semi-finals, you've got the two Premier League players in one semi, you and Adam. It's a massive opportunity for both players in that other semi-final. So how did you approach that game?
Well, I saw his celebration. He was punching the air and tipping water on his head, and I thought, he seemed quite relaxed. But then when I played him, he didn't seem all that relaxed, did he? He was missing a few. I mean, beating Martin the way I did, I expected a closer game there, because he's underrated player, I think. He's right up there at the moment. I was steady. All through the tournament, I don't think I ever averaged over 100, did I? I was mid-90s, low 90s, just steady and plodding along. Sort of, that's been the difference, I think. I'm taking out finishes when I need to. And that's my strongest part of my game, I think, is my finishing at the moment. But yeah, Adam, I was talking to him behind the stage. He's only 21. It's a great achievement. And he'll always be remembered for the water incident. He's got some character. He's a good chap to talk to as well, and his girlfriend or whoever that was, or his wife. I didn't realise it's pronounced Gavlas.
Yeah.
I've been saying Gaulas.
Either works, I think. Well, you've beaten Adam. You've done your interview. Then there's the break, the second semi-finals being played, and you've gone, I guess, from a very busy practice room on the Friday afternoon and evening to being the only player left in as the other two fight it out on the stage. What was that 45 minutes or an hour like in between your semi-final and then the final?
Yeah, I was watching the other game for a long part, and then got up and had a little practice. It gets pretty spooky at the later parts of the tournament. Because at the start of the weekend, there's like six people on a board, everyone fighting for practice time, and then all of a sudden you're in a dark room on your own, where it should be the most busy time, really, shouldn't it? But I suppose it gives you a chance to get your head together.
Well, then comes the final against Michael van Gerwen. He takes the first two legs, but I guess that was the first test for you. You answered it, winning the next four. Did that settle any nerves going on that little run and not seeing Michael race away with it like we've seen him do so many times before?
No, I didn't realise that I'd won the next four. No, like I say, the key to darts, one of the keys to darts is to not think. Just get up there and do it and play your game. Do all your hard work in practice and get ready for it, and then just let them go. And if you can do that, obviously keep your head on for counting and stuff, but not think too much about the crowd or, don't get nervous. I don't know how to do it. That's just experience, I think.
And the final itself, obviously, Michael went back in front after that. He was ahead for the rest of the game, but you got it back to 10-all. And watching at home, you couldn't tell it was your first major final. As you say, you looked so calm up there. But how were you feeling inside going into that decider?
Unbelievably calm. You'd have thought, I've been up there before where my stomach's turning over, your butterflies. This time there wasn't. Even though the crowd was roaring, and I could hear that, I didn't get that fluttery feeling anymore. And you'd expect that going for a winning dart for a major, you'd expect to get the wobbles a little bit. But it didn't happen. Thanks.
and Michael, he often talks about the right shots at the right times, and I've got to say that 180 in the decider to go from 256 to 76, that couldn't have been timed any better. And my co-host Burton, he noticed you were smiling as that third treble 20 went in the board. In that pressure moment, you looked to be having fun up there as well.
Yeah, I remember the smiling a lot when I played Michael 8 years ago. That's a lovely feeling. I've seen Gary Anderson do it as well when he was winning his world championships. You see him turn around and he's got a big grin on his face, and he's there. He's in the zone, That's if you can find that. I mean, the man, Phil Taylor, he seemed to be able to do that on demand. That's the secret. I don't know how he did it. Hopefully I'll find out.
You've added your name to a very short list of players that have won a PDC major. Can you describe what that moment was like when you hear the game shot, you're being announced as the UK Open champion?
I just... I think it's easier to feel something when you watch it back on video. But at the time, I was totally stunned and disbelief. Total disbelief. And I remember the moment I remember mostly is when the confetti went off and I looked up and I couldn't see anything outside that confetti that was so thick and dense. As I was just there by myself in this rain of paper coming down.
And just a few more before we let you go. It was mentioned on ITV as well. You were the oldest first-time finalist in a PDC major as well. And remember when we spoke before, those early memories of darts, and you mentioned it to the guys earlier, you didn't really take it seriously until your mid-30s. So to now be a major champion, that's been quite a journey the last 20-odd years.
It is. Got to say, don't ever give up. It's never too late. I mean, I was washed up when I was miserable, and somehow it all turned around. Oh, here comes a dog. Watch it. It's never too late. If you want to do something, just give it a go.
And away from the weekend, you've recently moved into that Pro Tour top 16, which is a good place to be seeded for the Euro Tours. But it's back to Barnsley this weekend. Is it good to have those events straight away so you can try and look towards another goal, or would you have liked to have a bit more time to let this all sink in?
I'm quite looking forward to going back, actually, just to see Darren and rub it in a bit. That's going to be the most fun bit, because me, Darren, Jeff Smith and Matt Campbell sit on the table, and we love to give him a bit of a dig, because he's one of the funniest people on tour. He's always got a story for you. But we do like to bring him down a peg or two sometimes.
And just lastly, aside, you mentioned it, the Gibraltar Open you won on the WDF side, but Sunday, that was your first PDC title. I guess now the next target is to work backwards. You've got a major. Now you want to tick off a Players' Championship and a Euro Tour as well this year. Yeah,
that's a nice way to do it, really. I usually do things incrementally, one step at a time. But this is a little bit of a leap. So, yeah, Pro Tour would be lovely, because I think that's a real tough one, that is, because you don't get to start in the third round. You have to start from the first, and you usually got to go through a seeding system, so you're going to definitely play a few big players on them. You don't get these random draws. So, yeah, that's my next goal, I think. Maybe get to another final. Just get up there and get in the TV tournaments. I'd love to get in the TV tournaments this year as well. I know I'm in the Grand Slam, which is great, and most probably the World Championships, if not definitely. So match playing that lot, that'd be nice.
Excellent. Well, Andrew, congratulations on the title of the weekend. It was great to watch, and wish you all the best for what else is to come this year, and thanks very much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Free beer, anyone? Now that I've got your attention, the weekly Dartscast are excited to be partnering up with the guys at Beer52 to offer our listeners a free case of beers. Head on over to beer52.com/darts and cover the postage cost of £5.95 to claim your free case of beers from our good friends at Beer52. I've just got on board with Beer52, and as a member each month, they send me a case of unique and varied beers from a different part of the world. Imagine that. Each month trying out beers from a different country. In the last 10 years, Beer52 have been to 40 different countries, including the US, Australia and Germany, and they've also included a range of breweries in the UK too. So, to claim your free case of beers, go to beer52.com/darts. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the darts, and enjoy your beers, and let's get back to the rest of the show.
Thanks again to Andrew for joining us now, continuing our look back at the UK Open. Lots to discuss away from the two finalists. We've spoken about Andrew, we've spoken about Michael van Gerwen, but what else caught your eye from the weekend in Minehead?
Well, I mean, I kind of already answered some of this on the first question, because a lot of what caught my eye over the weekend was the players that eventually went out to Andrew Gilding. I mentioned 3 of them, and I'll talk about them again now. Going in reverse order, the semifinal opponent, Adam Gavlas, he, of course, had to enter in the 3rd round for being ranked in the top 64, but he played very well in a shorter match against Mario van der Bohade, who is a very tricky opponent. He's, a player who I think will do well enough to get into the top 64 this year, and averaged 99 in that match, but Gavlas won it. I didn't see that match, but obviously, it was a high-quality affair. I saw a lot of his match against the qualifier, Luke Littler. Luke threw everything and the kitchen sink and the kitchen sink from the board next door at Gavlas, and Gavlas was just always just finding a way to stay ahead. For much of that match, they were both averaging north of a ton. Littler was averaging 102, 103 in the early goings. In the end, he averaged a 15 dart leg, 100.20, but Gavlas won that match 10-8. And Littler is another player who did catch my eye, but I'll let you talk more about him if you want to, because I want to talk more about Gavlas. The match against Will O'Connor, over a ton, and just absolutely pummeled O'Connor, who was another player who was having a pretty darn good weekend. He had only just earlier in the day knocked out the defending champion in the last leg decider in a match where both of them averaged well on 100. And then he beat Rob Cross in the quarterfinals. It was a really good weekend for Gavlas. I talked about Schindler earlier. I forgot to mention it started out by him beating Simon Whitlock, a player who's resurgent at the very least this year, if not looking pretty close to the player he used to be. But Schindler beat him in that. I mentioned his win over 80. Another player who otherwise would have caught my eye. Had a brilliant win, 80 did, over Matt Campbell just the round before, and averaged well over 100 in that match. Averaged well over 100 another one, but was no match for Schindler. And then obviously the win over Clayton. I talked about Luke Woodhouse already, who also caught my eye. But I'll mention just one player who didn't end up losing to Andrew Gilding, because it's not all about Gilding this weekend, just pretty much close to it. And that's one of the players who actually ended up jumping in the rankings more than Gilding. Gilding went up 16 spots. Karol Sedlacek also went up more than Gilding. One player went up even more than either of them, and that was Jeffrey Deswan. It looks like the Black Cobra is back. He had a good win over Gert Nenches in the 2nd round. He had a very good performance against Danny Janssen, who won a title last year in the 4th round. But I think the creme de la creme for him was that 5th round tie against Gerwin Price, the world number 4. Gezi averaged over 100, but it was nothing compared to Deswan's 105. And that's what Deswan was doing a few years ago when he broke through, when he made the semifinals of the World Match Play, but also defeated MVG at the UK Open in an earlier round. He was playing at that mid-hundreds average against one of the best players. We haven't seen that from him for a few years. That's why he had to go back to Q School to win his tour card. But if he's now back playing like he was 5 years ago, there's every reason to think that we're going to see him in more televised events later this year. He still has a lot of work to do if he's going to get to the World Match Play this year. But if he plays like this, he'll at least put himself in that competition to get to the World Grand Prix, to get to the European Championships and the Players' Championship finals. And we know once he gets on stage, he can beat anyone. He obviously did it against Gezi. He caught my eye as a player who maybe is finally back at or near his best.
Some good picks there, and there really is a lot to unpack from the 3 days. It is only a one weekend event, but there's an awful lot that gets crammed into those 3 days. You've got so many players, so many games, and so many stories that come out of it. And the nature of it, as soon as one round is over, you're on to the next one. So you don't really get enough time to let those stories shine as much as you might like them to. But starting from the Friday afternoon, and I didn't get to see much of the Friday or Saturday afternoon due to work, but I saw a lot of Friday evening and Saturday evening, and I was locked in watching all of it on Sunday. But I've got to say the streaming of the boards as well, that was something that we spoke about in the build-up. This was the first year that the PDC were going to have streams on boards 3 to 8, and I thought it worked really well. We didn't get the dream commentary lineup that we were hoping for on all 8 boards. If you missed it from the streams, boards 3 to 8, it was a 2-camera split screen setup. You had one side showing the board, the other half of the screen was showing the players throwing, and then you had the noise from the crowd in the multi-board room. So yeah, it was a good setup for it, and I thought having all the games streamed, it did add a lot to the event, and I think that's going to be a big selling point for this tournament going forward. With the amount of players you've got, 158 players we had in it this year, it's a chance to watch any of those players, and I think that's exciting for darts fans. You're guaranteed to see your favourites play. You're not relying on them being picked for board 1 or board 2, and if you're the defending champion, Danny Noppert, your first game on board 5, so you got to watch him play as well, which was good. But yeah, you mentioned a few of the guys that I was going to mention, and got to mention the two 16-year-olds right from the start, Luke Littler and Thomas Banks, both making their debuts in a major, both wearing the Riley's red polo shirts, and they acquitted themselves superbly and both made it through that manic first session, winning through to the 4th round. And Luke Littler losing with that 100 average to Adam Gavlas, who you mentioned, and definitely deserves a mention. His best run in a major, getting to the semi-finals, and Thomas Banks getting that main stage experience playing Gerwin Price, and from two players that are at the very start of their careers to one who's on his last dance, as he calls it, Richie Burnett at 56, the second year of his tour card, making it to the quarterfinals, beating Peter Wright on that Saturday night. And what a game that was. Okay, the quality, it's not going to be the highest quality of a game you're going to see, but won it 10-8, and I think he led 7-3 at one point. Peter Wright got it back to 8-all, and you're thinking, is Richie's race run here? But breaks for 9-8, and the 88 finish in 2 darts, it was like going back 25, 30 years. The clinical nature of his play on the tops as well. He was really good on the tops, but the 88 finish to get the job done. And yeah, there's a lot more work that Richie needs to do this year if he's going to get into that top 64 and extend this run into a third year. But what a run he's had at the weekend, and he'll take a lot of confidence from that. And a player that you mentioned as well, and going, I didn't work in chronological order, I've gone from the beginning to the end, to someone probably in the middle of their career now, is Jeffrey Desvan. And you mentioned him, he won back his tour card at Q School, started in the first round, and he was the player that went the furthest of all the players that started in that first round, getting to the last 16, losing out to Rob Cross. But that Saturday afternoon, beating Gerwin Price 10-8 with that 105 average, definitely deserves a mention. And the Black Cobra's back, I've got to agree with that. And just lastly, and I said it on social media, but we've got to say it on the show as well, a big thank you to Jackie Oatley, the presenter on ITV. It was a nice surprise. I was watching the darts Sunday night, and to hear Jackie plug the weekly Dartscast, I wasn't expecting that. That was a cool moment. We've been fortunate to get a few shout outs on the Pro Tour streams from Dan Dawson, Edgar TV on his platform as well. But to my knowledge, I think that's the first one we've had on TV. So a little bit of fame for us, we've made it. So yeah, thank you to Jackie. And even before seeing the drama that played out in the final, that capped off a fun tournament, getting that shout out. So yeah, we do appreciate that.
Unfortunately, I missed the shout out. I was watching, but I had it on mute as I was playing darts with some friends at the same time. So I did not hear the shout out, but I do echo that thanks. It's good to know that people are preparing for their work by listening to us. We appreciate the shout out. But now let's move on. We've talked about the UK Open. You've listened to Andrew Gilding talk about the UK Open, but now it's time to look ahead, because night 6 of the Premier League in Liverpool will be coming at you on Thursday night. Will be coming at you today if you're listening the day we drop. It will have already come out if you wait until Friday to listen. But first match on, Gerwin Price, who's currently in 4th, still has never made it to the playoffs in the Premier League. A couple of fifths his best. Goes against Peter Wright, who still hasn't won a match and is now just 2 defeats away from equaling Glenn Durrant's mark of 9 consecutive Premier League defeats. That's one, of course, spanning back to last year for Wright. How do you see this match?
Well, unfortunately, this segment we can't talk about Andrew Gilding. Maybe we can next year if he gets in the Premier League. And just a shout out to you, Burton, because you did well in the predictions last week. 5 points for you. I got 3, so you're closing that gap on me. But starting with this first game, and last week on my picks, I tried to do the reverse psychology, which didn't work, backing Johnny Clayton to beat Peter Wright in the hope that I got it wrong and Peter Wright won. It did go to a last leg decider. It was a fairly scrappy game, Clayton winning that one with a sub-90 average, and then going into the UK Open, Peter Wright making it to the last 16 before, as we mentioned, losing out to Richie Bennett. And all weekend it looked like he was chopping and changing his darts, and I put it on Twitter as well, as Peter Wright maybe gone to the well one too many times in that pursuit for perfection and that extra 1%, because he said at the weekend he doesn't feel comfortable with any darts at the moment, and that's coming from someone that used to be able to play with pretty much anything. He'd pick up a set of darts and pretty soon he'd average in the mid to high 90s, then into the hundreds, and that's not happening at the moment. Going Price, we mentioned his defeat, losing to Jeffrey Desvani. He played pretty well all weekend, didn't do too much wrong in that game, and I think this one is going to go the way of Going Price. I can't see it going any other way at the moment, so I'm going to go 6-3 to the Iceman.
Well, I said last week I correctly picked that Peter would lose that match, but I said I'm not writing him off quite yet for the entire season. And obviously the confidence isn't there right now. Obviously there's something wrong with his game. But what better way to get that back than to win a match against one of the best players in the world? I think Peter Wright is going to get his first win of the Premier League campaign here. I think he's going to win at 6-4. I think if it goes to a last leg decider, he loses. But I think he's going to get a 98 out or something like that to pip it 6-4 and finally get his first points of the campaign.
Well, we're already going different on our picks. Let's see what we're going to pick for this next one. It is Michael van Gerwen, the runner-up of the UK Open at the weekend, against Johnny Clayton. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I mean, MVG's won consecutive nights in the Premier League, made it all the way to the final of the UK Open, as we've discussed. He's obviously playing really well right now, and he's, for the most part, playing really consistent right now. Johnny Clayton, not quite at that same level that he was at last year in the Premier League when he topped the stage, won 4 nights, didn't really hit his best in the UK Open either. I'm not worried for Clayton right now because, as I said, he's still the player who, as I said last week, he's still the player who so far this year is leading everyone on tour in the Players' Championship events, averaging nearly a ton, and he's nearly 2 points clear of the third best player so far this year. So he's obviously, for the most part, been playing at a high standard, but he hasn't been doing it on television. MVG is just on fire right now. That final in Minehead aside, I think that'll be just too much for the Ferret. I'm going to go 6-3 to the world number 3.
Yeah, it's a repeat of last week's final, and MVG looking for the hat-trick, as we've talked about him on the show already. He's going to be a wounded animal, I guess, after losing that UK Open final on Sunday. Those back-to-back titles in the Premier League, they've opened up a 6-point gap at the top, so regardless of what happens this week, he's going to be top going into next week. He's got a little bit of a cushion now. Johnny Clayton at the final last week, that's put him within 1 point of the playoffs. Michael, he's won their 2 Premier League meetings so far this year, but I think Johnny gets some revenge here. His overall record with MVG is pretty decent, so I think the tide's going to turn here. I'm going to go 6-4 to the Ferret.
A third of the 4 quarterfinals on night 6. Chris Dobie, who won the first night but hasn't gotten a point since then, going against Nathan Aspinall, who's up to third in the table, tied for second, but he hasn't won a night. How do you see this one?
Yeah, both of these guys are going to be playing in front of quite a few more people than they were Friday night. Both were on board 8 in the UK Open, which shows the strength in depth that we've now got in the PDC. That was an incredible lineup on board 8 on Friday at the UK Open. And with the Premier League, I didn't expect Chris Dobie to lose 4 games in a row. I thought he would beat Dimitri van den Berg last week. They both averaged 104 in that game, but Dimitri winning it 6-3. Nathan Aspinall, it seems to be that Michael van Gerwen is the man stopping him more often than not at the moment. Last week, Van Gerwen beat him in the Premier League, and then he ended his UK Open hopes in the quarterfinals on Sunday. So I think he's going to be glad to be on the opposite side of the draw to him. But like I said, I wasn't predicting 4 defeats in a row for Dobie, and I'm the same this week. I'm not expecting him to lose 5 on the spin. So yeah, I'm going to say this is the week that he turns the tide on that. I'm going to take Dobie in this one to win it. A tight one, I'm going to go 6-4.
Well, another one that we're going to go different on. I think Nathan Aspinall's just playing better than Chris Dobie right now. I mean, it's not that Dobie has done that much wrong over the past few weeks. He only averaged 105 nearly in Exeter, but didn't get over the line. He did have that poor match the previous week against MVG. For the most part, he has been playing well, but Nathan Aspinall, he's just clinical, and he knows how to win. Dobie has been playing well for the most part, but hasn't been getting over the line. Mix those two together, and I think it means more of the same. I think Aspinall really is on a mission to one up what he did last time in the Premier League and go that one step further. And right now, he's putting himself in that position. He's making sure he's ready for those quarterfinals. That's why he's pointed 4 of the 5 nights. He's one of only 2 players, the other being MVG, to have done that. He knows the importance of being ready for the quarterfinal to make sure he gets the 2 points, and I think he will as well. Will again, I should say. So I'm going the Asp to win it 6-4.
And the last quarterfinal that we've got to make our predictions for, it is the world champion, the world number 1, Michael Smith, against one of the beaten semi-finalists in Minehead at the weekend, Dimitri van der Berg. How do you see this last one going?
I think it is tough. I mean, Dimmy's been pretty good this year if he doesn't have to play Michael van Gerwen, but he's been pretty bad when he does have to play Michael van Gerwen, and that's not just in the Premier League, that's across anywhere where he's competed against him. Michael Smith, of course, as you said, the world number 1, the world champion. He's already won one of these nights. And he was absolutely brilliant in winning that night. He hasn't always brought his best. He already has 2 quarterfinal defeats, including one last time, but he's not yet gone out consecutive quarterfinals. And I just think he's going to rise to the occasion. I think this will be a very high quality affair. I think they both average north of a ton, but I think Michael Smith gets the better of Dimmy. I'll go 6-5, last leg decider, and the match of the night.
Yeah, I agree. This is a hard one to call. And looking at the table as well, it's the closest quarterfinal that we've got. There's only 2 points at the start of the night separating Michael Smith in second and Dimitri van der Berg in fifth. And as I said, we saw Dimitri get to another major semi-final off the back of that World Championship semi-final in January at the weekend, and again losing out to Michael van Gerwen and again not performing to the levels like we know he can. But we've gone pretty opposite on these picks this week, and I'm going to keep that ball rolling for this last game as well. So yeah, I'll be different to you. You said it's going to go to a decider and it's going to be Michael Smith. I'll go the other way around. I'm going to go with Dimitri van der Berg, and maybe this will be a game where it gets a little bit nervy at the end, and maybe both players will miss match darts, and then Dimitri will come back and hit double 4 to get over the line.
We'll see it. I think that's 3 that we picked differently, so that means we're guaranteed to get at least 3 matches right. But again, we've been doing somewhat well recently, so who knows? Maybe we figured this thing out. But now we'll move on to our second guest on this week's show, and it is with, as you said, a former major champion, Mark Dudbridge.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the former World Master and a former World Championship finalist, Mark Dudbridge. Thanks for the time, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Morning, welcome.
Great to get you on, and we'll give our listeners a bit of background. We've been trying to arrange this call during the week, but we've sent you somewhere else. So where are you calling from today?
Well, currently in the hotel in Chiswick with my sponsors, Marshall Tufflex and CEF Electrical, and kind enough to be taking me to Twickenham tomorrow to watch England against France. So yeah, a real treat.
Very nice. Well, it's the first time we've had you on our show as a guest. There's lots to get to, but let's just start with the World Seniors, because you made your return on TV for their World Championship around 4 weeks ago now. What was it like going back on that Circus Tavern stage?
Yeah, on reflection, a real buzz. I was very nervous to start with. I didn't know what to expect, really, being back in front of the cameras. And yeah, I think I put a good show in and probably could have done better in the end.
And for a lot of darts fans watching, it was the first time that they'd seen you play for a little while. I said on our show you were one of the players who surprised me the most. I call it the Q action, but your throw I thought was one of the best in the field. So how did you feel going up there playing again?
Yeah, I felt really good. Obviously, over the years, I've had numerous shoulder problems, operations, and yeah, my throw let me down, and hence why I sort of fell out of the game and disappeared. But it all seems good now, and you know, nice straight, and the 180s have come in, and a few big finishes, and yeah, I'm buzzing for the future again.
good to see. And you averaged in the high 80s in all three of your games, losing out in a close quarter-final with Kevin Painter. How did you reflect on the weekend when you made that trip home back to Bristol?
Mixed emotions, really. I think if you'd have said I'd have made the quarterfinals not knowing what to expect, I'd have probably taken it. But after getting there and winning the first set 3-0 and 2-0 up in the next set, I'd probably feel a little bit disappointed in the end. But fair play to Kevin, he come back strong and took some good finishes out, and he progressed.
And from this new chapter in your career, let's circle back to the very start for you in darts. And I was reading on your website, you first got interested in the game in your early teens, and Dennis Priestley was an idol of yours. You liked watching him play. So where did it go from there? How did you then start playing yourself?
Well, I started playing back in the day with my dad, who was a fantastic player in Bristol. Yeah, I just got introduced into the darts teams, and it wasn't too long before I got asked to sort of play county darts. And one good thing about it, they wanted me to play county darts when I was about 14, 15, and my dad wouldn't let me play. He said, "You're too young for it. It's not going to do you any good." And he kind of held me back, which was looking back now, which was a blessing, because there was a number of young players at the time who went into the county side and were never heard of much later, kind of ruined their confidence. So I owe my dad one for that.
Well, you mentioned those early days. This is around the late 80s, early 90s. So what was the darts scene like growing up back then? Did you get involved in the pub leagues and Super League once you started to make a name for yourself?
The darts scene in Bristol has always been very strong. It's great dart players in Bristol. So I was lucky enough to play for all the best teams, and I had great advice, great grounding from experienced players, and they're always sort of telling you what you were doing wrong, and also, which is important, what you were doing well. And I had a great schooling in Bristol, so I was very lucky.
Well, speaking of making a name for yourself, you certainly did that in the 2002 World Masters, then at the age of 29, winning the title in Bridlington. First of all, how did you get into the Masters that year? Was it through a local qualifier?
Yeah, qualified through the west of England, and it was quite funny because I just joined the PDC, and I played one tournament in Kilmarnock, and I loved it. It was back in the day where even in those days the setup was much better than a BDO. All the boards were nice and everything was really good, and I just happened to qualify for the World Masters, and I said to my wife at the time, she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to come out in the smoke at the Silver Tavern." That was my ball. And she said, "How about the World Masters?" I said, "Well, I'll go out there for some practice." And I rocked up there and won it. So all of a sudden I was number one in the world in the BDO, which was, so I had a big decision to make, but I stuck to my guns and stayed with the PDC, and I eventually come out in the smoke at the Silver Tavern, which was my aim.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in a moment. I was going to ask you, actually, in terms of your experience playing in tournaments like that before the World Masters, you mentioned you just played your first event in the PDC. Had you had any other experience playing in any big opens, going up against the big names before that?
No, not really. I mean, years ago we used to go down to Pontins at Breen Sands, which was the biggest tournament, but I started off in the youths. But no, I didn't go to many tournaments really. But at the time I was playing really well at county. I think I had 3 average on the trot, which was all over like 100 average. It was done in 3 darts in those days for like a 34 average one match, and I had a 35 something, then I had a 30 something. So I was playing well going into it. So it wasn't a big surprise for a lot of people, but I didn't expect to win the World Masters. And within a couple of days I'm on TV on the BBC. It just all went my way.
Yeah, I mean, what a story it was. I mean, you knock out the defending champion Raymond van Barneveld in the early rounds that weekend. Yep. So at what point are you starting to think I've got a serious chance of going all the way here?
I didn't. Well, not until I lifted the trophy. All I had in my mind, as soon as I made the TV stage, I thought, well, I've watched these guys on the telly and they don't throw them out the 20s. Just don't go out there and make yourself. That was my aim. And I remember playing Steve Beaton. I think it was a semi-final, and he's obviously a massive favourite. And I just thought, don't make a mug of yourself. But I got halfway through the match. I thought, hang on a minute, I could win this. So it all happened. It all happened for a reason. And I just kept the dart straight, and I got over the line and won a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the semi-final with Steve Beaton, that's a game that will stick in the memory, winning that one in a last set, and then a short break later you come back for the final, beat Tony West 7-4 to win the title. And what are the memories 20 years on that have stuck with you from that weekend?
Well, myself and my wife, after the event, we went into the chip shop opposite the venue and ordered fish and chips, I think, and we both looked at each other and just kind of went, what happened now? I was on the BBC and I've just won, the second biggest tournament in the world in the BDO calendar, and it was, we just looked at each other and she went, well done. And I went, well, what went on now? I've done okay.
No, he definitely did. And as you touched on earlier, you made the decision to stick it with the PDC rather than the BDO.
Yeah.
Back then, did the Masters winner get a spot at the Lakeside? No.
I believe they changed the rules after me winning it, because I got invited down to the embassy to watch the World Championships, but I never spot. So they, I don't think they expected somebody to come from nowhere and win it. But I think they changed the rules the year after, so the winner of the World Masters got into Lakeside. So if that was the rule back in the day, it could have been a whole different story, because I wouldn't have been able to turn down Lakeside.
As you say, just before the Masters, you'd had a little go at the PDC. 2003, we see you make strides over in the PDC. You're playing in a lot of the TV events, the UK Open, the World Match Play, the World Grand Prix. You won a couple of titles on the floor as well that year. So how did you find that move into becoming more of a regular face in the TV events?
Yeah, it just seemed a natural progression. I was really confident. I had no fear of anybody. I wanted to play against the best, and ultimately I did. And probably looking back now, I probably should have won a little bit more. But hey ho, I'm still proud of my achievements back in the day.
And of course, everyone remembers your run to the World Championship final, but the year before your debut at the Circus Tavern, the smoke of the tavern, you knock out the defending champion John Part in the last set, you get to the quarterfinals. Did that run show that you could mix it with the elite? You could be one of them as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time I see John Part now, because I think I beat him the year after as well, he said, "Oh, not you again! You ruined my career." only in jest, because obviously he's had a wonderful career. But to beat John Part, and he was world champion, was it's great memories. 2004,
you get to your first major final in the PDC at the World Match Play, and I was having a look at the results earlier. That second round, 5 out of the 8 games went past the best of 25, including yours with Alan Moore and a little. So what was it like going deep into a game like that and coming out on top?
Well, I think once you get to that point, you're just taking it one leg at a time, and it's a very difficult situation to be in, because you're trying to hold your throw, and then you think, right, I'll break his throw now, and he goes off 140, 140. Right, you've got to start again. You've got to hold your throw, and it's a tough position to be in, but you've just got to stick in there and be strong, and just wait for that one opportunity where you get a shot to win by 2 legs.
Phil Taylor got the better of you in that final, but your paths would cross again 6 months later at the Tavern in the World Championship final. That week you came through some tough battles all the way through to get to that final. How do you look back on that run to the final at the Tavern?
Yeah, I played some great players there, and obviously the semi-final sticks in my mind against Wayne Mardell. He's a local favourite. He was a favourite at the bookies. He had all the crowd behind him, and I relished the challenge, and managed to get through to the final, which was amazing. And I fancied the final. I fancied better than the World Match Play a few months prior. I was probably caught in the headlights a little bit with Phil Taylor, but in the World Final, I fancied it.
Well, the final itself with Phil, you lose out 7-4 in sets, but it was close all the way through. It was 3-3, and Phil started to pull away at 6-3. You got a set back, but in the end, it was, had a look earlier, 2 ton-plus finishes in the last legs from Phil getting him over the line. So what do you recall from that experience playing in the final?
Yeah, I think Phil was 6-3 up, and we went out the back for a break, and they started bringing the check and the trophy out, and that got me back. I went, this ain't over, and I pointed at Phil. I went, this isn't over, and I think I won the next set. But that was a big rush of adrenaline, and probably just dropped off a little bit after that. But I was up for it. I thought I could win it. I didn't go into in the World Match Play final against Phil, probably, I was sort of taking the experience and trying to build, but I was for the World Final. I thought I could win it.
Well, off the back of that, we see you get invited to the first Premier League. Back then, it was a new concept for darts. How did you find that year being a part of the very first one, and only just missing out on the playoffs on the last league night in the end?
Yeah, well, it was a difficult one on the last night because I was getting married, I think, on the Sunday. And I didn't know whether I was going to qualify through. We had to cancel our honeymoon because we didn't know where I was going to get through. And ultimately I didn't get through on the night, but there was a lot of pressure there. I think I probably should have got through to the last four. I think I really needed Peter Malley. I can't remember exactly, but I didn't need to do a lot, and I think I lost both matches. That's history now. But it would have been fantastic to make the last four and that. But travelling around the country for the Premier League was unheard of at the time, and it was some experience, I'd say.
And you think to where it is now, that the Premier League all these years later, they're in some huge arenas, not just in the UK, across Europe as well. A lot of people tuning in every Thursday, attending the Premier League now as well. How do you look at it now, being in the first one, to see how far it's got now?
Oh, it's just amazing, isn't it, the amount of people they're playing in front of. But it is difficult. The travelling, obviously, it wasn't as bad when I was in it, but these guys are travelling now, in the Premier League, and then they've got to go and play in the Pro Tours on the weekend, and it's a huge sort of drop down. And I admire players going to the Pro Tour on the weekend after playing in the Premier League and get to the final or win one, because it takes them doing, physically and mentally. The Premier League's so good for the players, the exposure, the money. They should be pleased they're in it.
One moment back to you I have to ask you about, and I'm sure it comes up often at a certain time each year, is the World Grand Prix, and that decider with Andy Jenkins in 2007. You missed your first 9 darts at the double to start, but you come back and win it. How did you keep your belief that you could win that leg?
I was playing with some different equipment and some these tiny little flights, and I was practicing so well. And once I got away, and I think I went out in 12 darts, and I knew I was going to get it. And that was why I got excited, because I thought the practice game has gone onto the stage, and there was a leg, but it just felt right, and it was just a big relief for me. I think probably embarrassed myself a little bit, but it keeps getting shown on TV, so it's not too bad.
You came out on the right side of it, and you were still a regular at a lot of the TV events after that, Blackpool, Dublin, up until 2011, but then the deep runs dried up for you. Looking back now, can you put your finger on what caused that drop in results at the time?
Yeah, it's just the shoulder injuries and the problems I had throwing. I mean, I couldn't practice more than 10 minutes. Without my arms sort of hanging off, and it was just a combination of things. Obviously, if you can't practice, you don't know what you're going to get out there. And then I getting beat on the floor by players that I thought I should win or should beat, and it was just a combination of loss of confidence then, and obviously all the ability because my shoulder problems went, and but I was still in some events, which was quite difficult in those times, because I knew I wasn't playing well enough really.
How do you sort of try and go through that period of time? It's obviously a difficult time in your career, and you've got the shoulder problems. How did you try and get through that period?
Well, I tried everything. I was having massages, acupuncture. I paid for some treatment at the local boot play. It was like £500 a time, this laser treatment in my shoulder. I spent lots and lots of money, and none of it worked. So I was still searching to try and play well, but it was just impossible in the end.
And after dropping off the tour at that point, we've seen Q School introduced. There's the Challenge Tour as well. We've had a lot of players talk on the show about how tough Q School is. You've been a few times. How difficult is it to try and produce your best darts in that 1 week to get your card back?
I think I still had shoulder problems at the time, and to play for that period of time over so many days was, it was impossible really. But in brain, you still think you can do it, and yeah, obviously I just wasn't good enough when I was in there to get through, and that was, it's hard to take, really.
Away from Q School on the Challenge Tour, we saw you win 2 titles in 2017. That got you back on the tour, finishing second on the Order of Merit. What was it like getting back on the tour again? And as you say, with the shoulder problems you had, to win through on the Challenge Tour, which we know they're long days as well.
Yeah. Well, I managed to get through that, and obviously I knew it was a different challenge on the back on the Pro Tour. And I think this is what a lot of players don't realise. They rock up at Q School and they think, oh yeah, we want a tour card. They don't understand how difficult it is and the grind of it. And you can lose your confidence within a couple of weeks. Play your best darts and just get beat. So I was under no illusions. The Challenge Tour is a different kettle of fish to the Pro Tour. But obviously, once I didn't get my tour card, I tried my best, but my game wasn't good enough, and that's the harsh realities of it.
And a couple more before we let you go. Obviously, a lot of darts took a break during the pandemic. We've since seen you back playing in the Modus League towards the end of last year. Then that invite for the World Seniors. What was your reaction when you got the invite? Was it a straight yes, or did you take some time to consider it?
No, straight yes. I think the first Modus one I went in, I didn't know what to expect, and I think I've only won 2 games over the first 2 days. Then I got invited back with a nice group with Tony O'Shea and the Order guys, and I managed to get through that one. I played pretty well, and I've just had another bit of a poor one a couple of weeks ago with it. So it's difficult. You're playing it sort of 9:25 in the morning. Yeah, I find that quite difficult. Probably be better off in the evenings. But it's the Modus is a fantastic tournament. I mean, there's so many players coming through from it. So these guys are putting me off. They're on about playing for £50 a leg. That'd be dead, Andy, wouldn't it? Non-dart players. Yeah. Make it 100.
Make it worth your time.
Yeah. The Modus is fantastic. I mean, it's a lot of darts, and there's so many players that are coming through it that you've never heard of, which are all making, a lot of them making a name for themselves. And it's another fantastic thing for the calendar. And obviously, what Steve Brown, my business partner's running in from the 501 bars, is the ADC and the JDC, and there's so much darts to do, and it's not just all about the Pro Tour now. You can toddle around the outskirts and do okay.
Definitely. And for you now then, what does the rest of 2023 look like? First of all, are we going to see you in Blackpool in a few weeks, trying to get that golden ticket, get another chance to play Phil Taylor?
Yeah, I just booked up my hotel yesterday. So, I'm looking forward to that in Blackpool. Back up in Blackpool again. It's been a few years since I played in the Winter Gardens, but, it'd be nice to go back up and go on the Pleasure Beach. Have a little look around, and it's going to be nice. See some old faces.
It's a few weeks away, so what's the plan for the next few weeks to get yourself ready for that qualifier on the Friday night?
Yeah, well, I'll just be practicing in the 501 bar. A bit later on in the evening, a couple of hours a night, and do a few stretches in the room, and a few weights, and just make myself strong, and I'll be ready for it.
Well, Mark, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We do appreciate the time, and we wish you all the best for that qualifier in a few weeks' time, and what else is to come in 2023 as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry about the heckling I'm getting from my sponsors. Thanks for your patience as well.
Thank you for Mark for joining us this week. Now we'll finish up with a trio of listener questions. We'll do these a little rapid fire, all from friends of the show. First one coming from Warren Allsworth. Does this year's UK Open overtake 2018? Of course, that being the one that was behind closed doors and had Mark Walsh in a hoodie. Does it overtake the 2018 UK Open as the oddest of all time?
This is a great question, and it could have been our question of the week, actually. And I don't think there's anything that gets more odd than Mark Walsh playing a major in a hoodie. And as you say, for our listeners who might be newer to darts or don't remember the 2018 UK Open, it was the week of Storm Emma. It forced the Premier League night in Exeter the evening before to be cancelled. 11 players who were going to be in the UK Open, they all had to withdraw because of the bad weather, and no fans apart from players, guests, were in there. So it was virtually behind closed doors because of the snow and ice at that time. And obviously at that time it was surreal to see that, but it did become the norm for darts, behind closed doors darts, in 2020, 2021 with the pandemic. But back then, we'd never seen anything like that before. And there were some surprise results. We had Michael van Gerwen and Peter Wright both going out on the Friday night. Peter Wright, he was the defending champion, lost to Nathan Rafferty, who was a relative unknown back then, in the last 64. And that was a game that wasn't played on the main stage as well. So as much as we're complaining about Danny Noppert not getting that main stage treatment, we saw it happen back then as well with Peter Wright, who was a top 2, top 3 player back then. But we had some surprise names in the quarterfinals. Robert Owen, John Part, his comeback weekend for him. Steve West, David Pallett, and a couple of those getting to semi-finals as well. But the 2 big names, I guess, that got through to the semi-finals, they were kept apart, Gary Anderson and Corey Cadby. And I don't think, although Corey Cadby, it was a first major final for him, I think we'd seen enough on the tour to say that he could have runs like this, and we'd seen him get to a World Series final and winning a World Youth Championship as well. So it wasn't a big shock for me seeing him get to the final. But with this year's UK Open, you're bound to get some surprise names in that final day, and we had that this year. Richie Burnett, probably the most surprising of them. Then you'd say Adam Gavlas, and then on a similar par, I'd say Andrew Gilding and Martin Schindler. And I think the one thing that points towards it being 2023 is the end result, Andrew Gilding winning the title. But I think you could make a case for either, but I think I'm going to give the nod to 2018 just because of everything that went on behind the scenes, and Mark Walsh playing in a hoodie. It doesn't get much more odd than that.
Yeah, I think the weather in 2018 made a difference. And, there were a lot of players who weren't able to compete because they weren't able to get to the event because of the weather. The flights from Ireland were canceled, so neither of the Irish players made it. I remember Zoran Lerchbacher was not able to get there. A few of the other players who were coming from far away. I mean, I remember some were looking to see whether they could get on a boat to sail because there was no other way to get down because the roads were all snowed over. And I remember that was the year I was living overseas, so I was thankfully in a place that didn't have as much snow, but it was still the most snow I had ever seen in the UK. Travel was nigh on impossible. Factor that with the addition that there was pretty much the only people there were the players, the managers, and their families. It led to just and the cold weather inside the venue itself just led to some crazy results. I mean, obviously, having both Robert Owen and David Pallett make the semifinals, John Part, who hadn't done anything, he only qualified because this was back last year that they had the UK Open qualifiers. He won a couple matches, I think the last event, to just sneak in on countback to the UK Open and then go on a run to the quarterfinals. I remember his win over Mervyn King in, I think, the last 16. It was just unexpected. Can't really say it was turn back the clock because I don't think John Part really played that well in any match, but he just kept figuring out how to do enough to win. Led to a really crazy result. You mentioned Corey Cadby making the finals. Really not that surprising because he had won one of the UK Open qualifiers and everyone knew his pedigree. But a lot of really weird results coupled with the weather and just a bizarre atmosphere. I think you have to say 2018 was odder.
Next question comes from another long-time listener of the show, John Thompson, who says, which of these 4 players not currently provisionally qualified for the Grand Prix do you think has the best chance of making it in? Jose de Souza, Christoph Ratajski, Gary Anderson, or Andrew Gilding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, right now, Gilding is about a little over 2,000 pounds behind, but he's going to be seeded for the 5th and 6th Euro Tours. If he wins one match at each of those, that makes up the difference. And he's every chance to be seeded at some of the other ones. So he's going to have a lot of opportunities. De Sousa hasn't been getting the same results, but he's still been playing pretty well. Ratajski's been a bit inconsistent this year. Both of them have quite a bit of ground to make up, but still only 4,000 or 5,000 pounds out. Anderson, only 3,500 pounds behind. He's now playing the Eurotour qualifiers. That's going to give him a chance. And obviously, it seems like the fire is still there, and he's still overall playing at a very good standard. I think all 4 of them do have a good chance. We'll see whether Anderson keeps entering the Eurotour qualifiers. That will be a determining factor. But I have to say Gilding's the most likely, not just to see the closest, but he's going to be in those Eurotour seeds, and he's probably playing the best of those 4. I mean, he's the only one of the 4 who has won a major in the past 48 hours or so.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against that. And just looking at the race at the moment, I think you've got Jim Williams in 16th spot. He's got a £500 lead on the players closest to him. But the four that John mentions there, not far away at all. And you've also got a lot of darts to be played. We're talking 10 or 11 Euro Tours, not to mention 20 Players Championships. But like you say, I think at the moment they're all in with a good chance. And I think I've got to agree with you. If I had to pick one player right now from that four, it would be Andrew Gilding. And that's obviously helped by the win on Sunday. But it's how does he respond to that? He said to the guys on the media call I was on earlier that he expects to lose in the first round this weekend. And I guess that's with all the hype that's going to be surrounding him. But he's going to try and keep his head shrunk, were his words, going into this weekend. But looking further on, when that's died down a little bit, as you say, he's going to be seeded for the next few Euro Tours 5 and 6, and looking good to be seeded for the next few after that if he carries on. So that does mean you do have to win those games on the Euro Tour. You can be seeded for the second round, but if you lose that second round, as we know, you get the prize money, but it doesn't go on your rankings. So he's got some work to do, but on the other side of things, he doesn't have to worry about them qualifiers. And as you mentioned, Gary Anderson, we have seen him enter one of the qualifiers. I think he lost to get Andrew Gilding in that qualifier as well, of all people, but I've seen today that he's entered the qualifiers for events 5 and 6, so he knows how important these Euro Tours are. But I think Gilding, he's my favourite from that list. Then I'll probably go with Gary Anderson if he can start coming through some of those qualifiers. And his form looks to be picking up. You look at some of the averages that he's throwing. We know the big average at the Masters, but at the weekend, the 104 against James Wade on Friday night, and the practice sessions that he's having with Ryan Searle, he's putting in the extra hours now. And that's going to pay off eventually, you'd imagine. So, yeah, Andrew Gilding, number one from that list, and Gary Anderson, I'll put him as a number 2.
And we have one more question. This one comes from Ross Barber. Excluding people named Mark Walsh or Co Stumpe, who would you most want to win a major who's currently outside the top 32 in the world?
Yeah, I've got to say it's a shame about that last part, because we would have backed our respective goats to make a comeback and win a major. And sorry, Andrew Gilding, that would top what he did at the weekend, no doubt about it. But looking outside the top 32, there's a few names there that come up for me, and we've got to chat to a lot of the players outside the top 32 on the show, and really enjoyed their company, and they've just come across as nice guys. And I guess you want to see the nice guys do well. So I'll pick out a couple of the names from that, and a name that we've not had on the show before. But to begin with, he's just dropped out the 32 after the weekend, but Alan Suter, the work that he does away from darts, a firefighter, he raises guide dogs as well. He's involved in darts academies in Scotland. He's a very busy man, and we've had him on the show. I enjoyed chatting to him, and so I'll put his name in the hat for that. I'd also put Roby John Rodriguez in that mix as well. We saw what he did last year, get into the World Match Play, and that Euro Tour final that he had with Luke Humphreys, one of the games of the year away from TV, and the showmanship that we saw last year with the 180s, getting the 2 treble 20s, the pause, revving up the crowd. He's a great character when he's on form, and to see him go deep and win a major, I think that would be an entertaining watch for us to follow. And my third one, sticking with the entertainment factor, you actually mentioned him on the show earlier, and that would be Karel Sedlacek. I know his English isn't the best, so the interviews would be pretty tricky. I don't think we'd get a 15-20 minute one-to-one with him after winning a major title, but I'd love to see how he'd celebrate a major title win. And you've got Matt Ward as well, he's manager at MDA. I'm sure he'd have plenty of ideas as well, and if he did it wearing that Max and Paddy shirt as well, I think that would get a lot of attention as well. Seeing someone wear that shirt lifting a world match play or a world championship, that would be an image that you wouldn't forget in a hurry.
Yeah, and those are good shouts. And I'll add a couple more restrictions for what I put on myself for picking the players. I'm not going to include a player who has won a major before, so you can't, whether that's in the PDC or the BDO. So no Steve Beaton, sorry, Dan Dawson, no Mensah Sulovic, players who I might otherwise have considered. And also I'm limiting it to people who currently have a tour card because, well, I would like to see myself win a major, and I wouldn't mind seeing you lift one either. But adding all those in, it was tough because there's a lot of players on here that I would like to see do it. Some see them get back to playing near their best, seeing Jeff Smith or Devin Peterson, players who have threatened it in the past. Jeff Smith, obviously, in the BDO, making a Lakeside final. Devin Peterson making the semifinals of the European Championships, but both of them well off the best of their game. Seeing them get back up would be great. A player like Ian White, who's been so close to a breakthrough, but keeps falling at that quarterfinal, semifinal stage, now playing well again. I think he'd be a good one. But in the end, I decided I want them all to win. I want everyone to win. Everyone deserves their moment in the sun. So the answer is everyone. Anything else for this week?
What a weekend. What a show. And just to say thanks to our guests, to Andrew and Mark for coming on the show, to our sponsors as well, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow at Dartwolf180. Our new sponsor that came on board last week, Beer 52. If you want a free case of beer, just cover the postage, beer52.com/darts. I'm looking forward to sampling some of their beers after this week. I've got my half marathon in Great Yarmouth, so I've had a few weeks off the sauce, but after Sunday I'll be trying some of their beers out. And lastly, just to say thanks to everyone for listening again. We say it every week, but without you guys listening, interacting with us as well, showing your support, we wouldn't be able to do half the stuff that we do, like interviewing the new major winners a few days after getting that one-to-one time with them. So we're very fortunate, and a lot of that is down to you guys. So thanks for sticking with us, and that is everything that I've got for this week. So hang tight and enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. Just echoing what Alex said there. Thank you to all of our guests, listeners, sponsors, everyone who cares about us, whether they give us a shout out on ITV or not. We really appreciate all of you. We'll be back next week to recap some more Pro Tours and to look ahead to some more Premier League, some more Euro Tours that are just a few weeks away, and start that race towards Blackpool, which is only a few months away. Until then, hang tight as 2023 rolls along.